What a privilege to stand here with you, and what a humbling opportunity to stand here with you, and what an honor to be here with you to celebrate the life of such an incredible woman. She was a woman of many facets, and she was a woman of many names, you've probably discovered. Some of us call her Betty Ann. Some of us call her Betsy. Some of us call her Bunny. Some of us call her Colonel Paeth. Some of us call her Dr. Paeth. Some of us call her Elizabeth Paeth Lasker, and many of us call her Beth Paeth. 8 of us, including precious little Justice Elizabeth in the front row, will or do call her Grandma. 5 of you call her Mom, and 1 of you calls her My Love. Whatever name we call her, I think we can all agree about one thing. She is a big gift in our lives. Not was, not has been. She is a big gift in our life. Beth Lasker is a big gift from God in each of our lives. And while this box represents the way I see the treasure she gave me and the gift she is in my life, each one of you has your own box. Each one of you has your own treasured moments. Each one of you has stories of her love, stories of her faith, stories of her prayer. And so as we think about today, Beth Lasker is a big gift in each of our lives, and she's a gift from God that keeps on giving because she is written in our hearts. She's indelibly inscribed in our hearts. And Beth has introduced me to numbers of you. Seen people that I haven't seen in a number of years coming from Washington, D.C. that Beth introduced me to. But the reason this big gift is so important is she also introduced me to the lover of her soul. And I'm so grateful to her and so honored and so privileged to be sharing some things with you about how she did it and how she loved me. On September 29th, last fall, my phone rang. It was 4 o'clock, and it was Elizabeth. She asked me, she said, "I want you to speak at my memorial." Well, I immediately objected, and I said, "What about Fred or the children, or what about one of the pastors, or what about one of you, one of your friends who are in the East Bay who have known you so long and love you so much?" And she said, "No, I want you to do it. You have known me a long time. You know all of the children, and you love Fred, and you love the children." And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And she, in Elizabeth fashion, because I know she loves to get things done in advance. She loves to get things done in advance. And she started telling me all the things that she would like you to take away from this time together. And she started listing them, and I'm writing and making notes. And as I looked at them, I thought, this is a lot. As you know, she was never lacking content and hope and prayers. And I sat down at my computer that evening, and I started inputting and thinking and putting them into a list. And as I looked at it, I thought, this is what I would call habits of joy for your spiritual journey. And as I put them down, I said, I'll never be able to convey all of these. So I put together a summary sheet with these habits of joy for your spiritual journey. And if any of you would like to have a copy of it, they'll be in the reception area. And as I think about Elizabeth and being the big gift that she is, if she were to look at this gold bow on her box, she would be writing on it in every inch, "To God be all glory. To God be all glory. To God be all glory." And to help us remember that, and to help me remember, If you'd like a little gold ribbon, which will also be in the reception area for a bookmark or something to remind you of her steadfast passion for God to receive all the glory. So it's with that thought I tell you some things about her. And as I wrote down this list, I thought, this still won't convey all the things she wants to get across to you. So I went down and I asked my wonderful and talented husband, Bert, if we could call, what do you think about this idea? Let's call Fred and Elizabeth and see if we can make a video interview and then produce that, and if Bert would produce that into a film to show you. So we did it, and you'll be seeing that a few minutes later, a film of Elizabeth face to face. And as you look at the film, I want you to think about the many steps that she offered you in your life, the many treasures that she offered you in your life. And the first time, one of the treasures in my box, the first time I saw Elizabeth was in the lobby of the federal building, 450 Golden Gate Avenue. I might as well just carry this handkerchief with me. In the lobby of the federal building, the lobby, it's a high ceiling. And I was there with about 24 other people. And I looked across the lobby, and there was a figure, very good posture, very erect stance, walking confidently across the lobby in her Navy military uniform with all of the decorations that showed colonel. And I thought, she is special. And when I got a notice to report to the Public Health Service Clinic to be examined by a doctor for a health exam as a federal employee, which I was at that time, I went down and I was delighted that it was going to be the big cheese, Dr. Lasker, Dr. Paeth at that time. It was going to be Dr. Paeth. And I went through the exam, and I'm on the examining table. And as I'm on the examining table, she is standing over me with her hands over my stomach. And I look up, and I say, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I'm praying for your liver." So, livers are so important. And so I pray for the liver of all my patients. And I thought, she is different and she is special. A few minutes later, I sat in her office. She was behind her desk. There were a bookcase behind her desk, predictably. And as I looked in that bookcase, I saw something that surprised me. It was something that I had seen before but never opened. It was black, leather, and well worn. And I thought, she is different to have that book in her office, because I'd seen that book in my parents' home. I'd seen them reading it, but I never read it. Didn't think it had any relationship to my life today, because I was on a track. And I admired her because I thought, she's on a track too. And it was not too much later that our paths crossed in the federal building. And I realized that we discovered that we lived not far from each other. I lived just 6 blocks from her. And pretty soon, a couple months later, she invited me to breakfast. And I was really honored that she invited me to breakfast. And she did that occasionally. And then she started inviting me to the really special events. Family gatherings. When a family member was out of town or a missionary was out of town who was staying with them. And we would have this wonderful chocolate cake with ice cream. And the napkins were always, paper towels folded in 4. And I love that because I've always thought you had to be Martha Stewart to have such joy and hospitality in your homes. So that's another treasure that goes into that box from Elizabeth. And as I experienced her love and saw how Fred and loved each other so much, it was really quite a thrill. And this was before they had any children. And it just staggers me to think that I knew Elizabeth before Fred and Elizabeth were married. I knew her before the children arrived. And I've known her through so many situations. So it's such a joy to say that she has been consistently a woman of love, a woman who not only talked the talk, but lived the talk, and a woman of prayer. One morning I was in my flat in San Francisco, and I heard my name being called from the street. And I ran down the stairs and saw Elizabeth with one shopping cart, and Fred with the other shopping cart, and two little boys in each cart. They had just completed an hour and 15-minute walk around the neighborhood with these happy boys laughing and shoving and doing all the things that little boys do to each other. And I saw so many ways that they loved each other, they loved their friends, they loved their children. And I saw what great parents they are. And one thing that I was really honored with, Elizabeth asked me to write a letter recommending them for the adoption of, I'm not sure who, I think it might have been Matthew, to write a character reference letter for them. Can you imagine what a thrill that was? And in the letter, I included the line, if I were a child being placed for adoption, I would rather be adopted by Elizabeth and Fred Lasker than anyone in the world. And my letter still stands. There's such an exceptional couple, such an exceptional family. As Elizabeth invited me out to breakfast, one morning I said I was going to New York on Sunday and had a very difficult meeting with a publisher and our lawyers. And I was in a sweat about it. And Elizabeth said, she looked at her watch and she said, what time is your meeting? And I said the time, and she said, I will be praying for you during that meeting. I knew she loved me. I knew she loved me, and I knew she loved Jesus. Because another morning at having breakfast at Louis' Diner, I asked her about a business question. And she said something that she said to me many times, let me think about that and pray about it, and I'll get back to you. And because she and Fred had this wonderful, I thought it was incredible, but they thought it was wonderful, schedule where she got up at the crack of dawn, went into the office, and since Washington, D.C. was early, she could function way earlier than any of us got to work. And then when she came home early afternoon, they traded the baton, or traded the children, and Elizabeth started taking care of the children for that day, and Fred went to his office to see patients that day. So one day when she was coming home, before she relieved Fred, she stopped and showed me the Bible. Now this is the Bible. This is not the Bible she gave. This is the Bible she gave me. This wasn't the Bible she had. She showed me the Bible and she turned it around so that I could read from the pages. And she said, I think when you read this paragraph, you'll find principles that will help you with that decision you're struggling with. Now, that was a shock to me because I did not think the Bible had any relation to what I was dealing with today, but it did. I didn't know it, but it did. Later on, one of my books became a brisk seller. I won't say bestseller, but brisk seller, and I was asked to speak on Good Morning America. And I felt like I'd climbed the ladder. That was it. That was my goal. And as I left the studio, collapsed in the back of the limousine, the driver turned to me and saluted and said, you must feel on top of the world. I said yes, but I felt no. But as the limo proceeded down Park Avenue, I thought of someone who didn't feel empty like I felt empty. I called Elizabeth, and the next Saturday, we went for a walk on the beach, and I posed my big question. Elizabeth, get this. Elizabeth, with all that I've done, I still feel flat. I feel spiritually empty. And she waited a moment. We continued walking, and then she stopped and looked at me, and I can still feel these little beads of ocean mist in her hair. And she said, if you will pray and read something in the Bible daily for a year, you will not feel spiritually flat. I was so disappointed. I wanted to have something exotic, a pilgrimage, something. But because I knew she loved me, because I admired the life she had, I did what she said. I read something in the Bible, And she had encouraged me to read, to seek to know the character of God. And as I sought to know the character of God, I discovered he was very different than what I had expected. He was very different. He was not someone who was going to do what I thought, judge the amount of good things I had done, and then say, hopefully, come on in to heaven. I read that he was a giver. And as I continued reading in the Bible, I started recognizing that my life felt very short of what God had in store for me. And I confessed my wrongdoing. I asked God to forgive me. And I asked him to be manager of my life. And he did. And my life continued to change. Five years later, it was not something that I expected, but it was something I dreamed about. I got married. And you know, when you get married in middle age, you have a chance to collect a whole closet full of expectations about what married life is like. You know, candlelit dinners, romantic notes, soft music in the background, hand-holding in the living room. Well, when I married this wonderful widower with 3 teenage children, we lived up on I moved to Loch Lomond Way, their home, and 2 of those precious children were at home, 12, 17, 19-year-old was already out. And I started having a problem. I did so many things wrong. Oh, I decided I have to write an apology letter to each of the 3 kids. I did so many things wrong. And a year and a half later, I was in pain. I was in pain, and I knew who to call. Elizabeth. I called her, and she said, well, I can't see you till 9:30. So at 9:30, I was parked in her driveway. I was looking at my watch, and at 9:30, I was ringing the bell. She ushered me into this little room off of their family room, a little room with a blue love seat. We sat down, and I poured out my pain. I think I didn't find the right man. I think I married the wrong man. And because I knew that my life would have a lot less stress, a lot more peace, a lot more joy, if I followed biblical principles, I asked her the big question: is there any biblical way out of this marriage? And you can picture Elizabeth. She took my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, no. There is no biblical way out of your marriage. And then she added the really important part: you are about to become a woman of prayer. And I'm so thankful for her, because one of these treasures is she helped save my marriage through God's wisdom. I'm so thankful for her to that. I wouldn't have precious Ben and Kelly, who are here, and their 3 little guys in my life. There's so many things I wouldn't have in my life if she had not said God's truth. She believed in putting on the belt of truth first, even with her friends, and I'm so thankful for her. So she means a great deal in my life. And as I was thinking about this, on the summary sheet of these habits of joy, this was clearly number 4. Remember that God requires that he be number 1 in your life. And that's a lesson she had told me many times, but I needed to hear it at that moment. And I'm so thankful I got to hear it at that moment. As I look at this gift box, there are many, many more treasures in it that I have from Elizabeth. As you look at your gift box, there are many treasures that you have from Elizabeth. And as you look at that ribbon, you will see what she has written on every inch: to God be all glory. And I know we think about that. We think about her many times. And sometimes I think I would just like to see her one more time. I'd like to hear her. I'd like to do things. I wish, and all these things which we can't do. But join me in watching Bunny, Betsy, whatever you call her, face to face.
When I was a child of about 13, my mother called me aside